done this a couple times. I'm looking a little tired, but glad to be here in Seattle with y'all. Our last two stops were in San Diego and LA. Flew to Seattle this morning and still working out some of the kinks of getting set up, but thank you all for coming. So the Brew Talks West Coast Tour is essentially a traveling free meetup for everybody in the beer industry to come have a couple beers, listening to about an hour's worth of business discussion, and do some networking. And we're glad you all could join us. Today, our first sort of Q&A panel is with Mike Gorman. He is the VP of Craft and Imports for Columbia Distributing. And he's going to help walk us through, we're going to talk a little bit about the Seattle market or the Oregon and Washington markets. They cover both states. But also just what he's looking for in craft brands and some of the trends that he's noticing. So
yeah, and I do want to preface, can you hear me?
Do we have his mic? Yep, there we go.
Am I on? I do want to preface by saying I worked for a craft brewery for the last 17 years, so I feel like I cracked the code, right? So, one in Boston, a big one in Boston. But,
yeah.
but this is cool because now I know the other side, so I can tell you guys everything. It's way easier than I thought it was. Yeah.
So Mike, I kind of wanted to kick things off here and get behind the Columbia Distributing eyes a little bit and what you guys are looking for in a craft brand. I know there's probably a few craft breweries out here that might be self-distributing or just getting going. And if you're going to take on a new brand, what are you looking for?
Yeah, well, first of all, you got to love craft beer, right? So having sold craft beer for the last 18 years, you guys are where it's at, right? So you're all pretty smart. You picked the right thing. But it's cluttered. I mean, it's very cluttered space, and there's a lot of options. And we don't, what we'll tell you and what we really mean at Columbia, and if you don't know Columbia, we sell Western Washington, we're out in Yakima, we're in Tri-Cities, and we're the state of Oregon. We're fairly large distributorship, so we've been successful over the years. But what we'll tell you is we don't want to be brand collectors, right? We don't just want to gather up a portfolio like it's a land grab and try to get our hands on everything and just control it, because, I mean, that's not good for us and it's not good for you guys. And we don't want unhappy suppliers, because that makes us unhappy, because we're just regular people, and when regular people come in and they're unhappy, we get unhappy, and it just takes all the fun out of the beer business. So we do want to be selective, only because it's got to be a good match. And I think what you look for these days is, first of all, if somebody has been self-distributing, that is effing wonderful, because they get it, right? People that have self-distributed come in with an amazing amount of insight, because they've had to get checks out of customers, and they've had to get deposits back, and they sort of feel our pain of what we do every day. So I think self-distributing is a wonderful way to start your brand. You will be much more in touch with your brand, with your customers. But what's going to happen is, if you're successful, the thing's going to get too big, right? So, and then you're going to need help, because you want to focus on your brand and your beer and your customers, not lugging all these heavy things around in a truck. So there's going to be a point where you really, if you're successful, you want to think about a distributor. So to answer the question finally,
yeah, get to it, will you? Jeez.
Well, I got a half an hour. So you look for, first you look at the principal, right? And what's their vision, and what do they want to be, and what do they know, and do they know their brand? Does their brand have a unique place? Have they thought their brand out? I don't know if you guys realize it, but there's a few IPAs out there, right? And I think you might want to think a little more deeply about something that's a little bit more ownable and unique. And when we get somebody that really has this vision for their brand, and they say, well, yeah, we're this, and we're this style, and we come in this package, and this is how we go about it, and this is what we mean, that's very exciting. So you really guys should think about your brand. And when somebody comes in that really has insight to their brand, that's a win. And then the second thing we look at is, is the business scalable? So have they thought it out, and do they realize the investment steps? Because you guys know, any of you guys that are in the brewery business, these investments come in these big chunks, right? And they're scary. But as long as you figure them out, and we know that you know the scale of your business and how it's going to move, and then how you're going to finance those. That makes for a wonderful partner, somebody who's really set up for success, and if your wildest dreams happened and you were successful, you know what you're going to do at every step of the way. So,
are you looking for brands that are going to scale, or what if you take on a brand that wants to scale to a certain point and has their limit there?
We'd be fine with that. We'd be fine as long as so the whole distributor brewer relationship is about mutual expectations, right? So if I know what you're selling and I know what I'm buying, and you want to be a 2,000 barrel brewery that focuses on oak aged sours and well, that's good, because then I can keep you happy, and if it fits a niche in my business, that's a wonderful relationship.
Right.
So if you get that up front, if you know what you want to be, that's wonderful.
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe tell the folks, and I'll throw this out there real quick. If you guys have questions for Mike or our next panel that's going to come up after Mike, feel free to tweet them at me. If you guys are on Twitter, you can use the hashtag Brew Talks, and I'll get it up here. Otherwise, we'll try to get to them if you guys just shout them out. Yeah, I did want to point out a couple stats to kind of help frame the conversation. A couple of Nielsen stats that really speak to the way craft is sold in Oregon and Washington. Brewers Association defined craft beer represents about 15.5% of the beer volume in Oregon, versus about 10.8% here in Washington. And these are Nielsen off-premise measured channels. So this doesn't take into account draft. But this is a good sort of measuring stick for how well craft does in the Pacific Northwest. And both those numbers, by the way, are compared to about 5.4% nationwide. And this is in Nielsen C-stores and grocery and food and mass and club and Walmart and everything else. Now, craft plus domestic crafty beers, if you will, about 23% of the volume in Oregon versus 19.5% in Washington. So knowing that, what sort of trends are you seeing amongst craft beers in Oregon and Washington?
Well, we're seeing double-digit growth, like you all are. It's seeping into other channels, right? So, I mean, this might answer your question, it might not. I mean, it's most vibrant in the specialty bars and the gourmet grocers and those specialty retailers like, I don't know if Chuck's here, but guys like Chuck's, you guys all know Chuck, the place where the food trucks kind of congregate on a Friday night. But those are the guys that are really leading it. But that's just sort of one element. It's gotten so big. I mean, this whole crafty thing, we think it's 37% of the grocery business.
Wow.
Yeah, so all in. And it's a little less in the C-store business, but the C-store business is growing faster. And then, of course, the restaurants are just going crazy with it. So it's incredibly vibrant. It's reaching a lot of accounts now. You guys have to decide how you want to develop your brand through stages of the market. I mean, I would, if I were starting a brewery today in Seattle, I would start it in the specialty segment. I'd go to some of the retailers I just mentioned. They help discovery. They talk to their customers. I'd go to those on-premise accounts. We all know them. They did away with tap markers a long time ago. They have plasma screens now. The brands change all the time, but they're really good for discovery. And I would get a really good buzz going. But then you have to have a vision, if you're successful there, about, well, what are you going to do with grocery? Because grocery is where most of the craft beer sells, right? Fred Meyer's, Safeway, these big stores, that's where most of the craft that we sell. I mean, we have the brands that have been developed over the last 20 years. So that's where they're selling, is grocery, and you have to have a plan. And then C-stores are getting into craft. C-stores are putting in growler fills, convenience stores, right? I wouldn't be surprised to see a 7-Eleven. I don't know of one yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if we get a 7-Eleven with a growler fill soon. So then you need kind of reach through the market. So that's what you have to think about, is not can you go excite a guy with a wonderful brand you're making that's in the specialty side. You're going to nail that. It's what happens if it hits. and then how do you scale this thing into all segments? Because that's, with craft at 37% of beer, I mean, Walmart's trying to sell it, right?
Right.
So I'm not saying go to Walmart, but eventually, you know, your brand's going to be in Walmart and 7-Eleven, places like that.
And that brings up just one thing I wanted to touch on. What brands are you currently carrying? I mean, you said you have some big brands and some smaller brands.
Yeah, we have big, I mean, so we've been in the craft business for a long time, Columbia has, so, but we don't have any more brands. Most markets you go to, if you look at Seattle and Portland, they're similar to New York City or Boston. You're going to have a large distributor who's anchored by Miller and Coors, right, and that's us in the market. And then you're going to have a large distributor that's anchored by the other guy, Anheuser-Busch. And then you're probably going to have 1 or 2 specialty distributors in the market, maybe more if it's a bigger specialty market. You have to think kind of long and hard. You really got to look beyond a distributor and look at your market and think, you know, where am I going to develop my brand? And if you want, like if you're like we said, if you're a brewery that wants to sell 2,000 barrels, try all kinds of different things, do barrel aging, keep it small, charge a lot of money, you can't go wrong with, you know, us or the specialty guy or anybody, because any of us can hit those 200 accounts that are really make and break for craft in this market.
In Seattle?
Well, almost in LA or San Diego or Seattle, anywhere I've been. But you have to think, if you wanted to go further, if you had dreams to go deeper in the market, then you have to think about a model where either you develop it in a specialty distributor and you get that guy to sell it to one of the wider distributors, or you start with maybe self-distributing and then you sell it to one of the distributors that can take you wide. Yeah, your idea has to be sort of build it and then expand it, right? And so that's how you guys should be thinking about the market and all classes. And you don't have to worry about things like drugstores or Walmarts just yet. But I mean, C-stores are picking up on this thing, and there's thousands of them, you know?
It definitely seems like you're hitting on this point of scale. You know, if a beer brand really takes off, they need to have the ability to scale it.
Yep, absolutely.
What are distributors doing, or are distributors doing anything to help craft breweries scale their businesses?
Well, I mean, we offer them, so if you look at Columbia, we offer the market. If you probably looked a couple of years ago, you would have said, wow, these guys have scale, they can take you anywhere, but can they build a brand? And that would have probably been our vulnerability. Whereas if you look at a kind of a small specialty house, you'd say, well, clearly they look like they could build a brand, but the question is, could they scale their business if this thing took off and I had to get into 1,500 accounts versus 200? So what I think, what we're certainly doing is building our capabilities, not for scale, because we're set up for scale. We deliver, in 2 states, we deliver 20,000 accounts over 120,000 square miles. We are set up for scale. But what we want to continue to reinforce is that we're also set up to incubate brands, right? So what we're doing to that end is...
Do you have an example of a brand you're currently incubating?
Well, I got a couple. Yeah, I got Rick over there, Emerald City, and Ryan's here, and Sean's here from Lazy Boy. And we just brought in, and if I missed anybody, it's because I didn't know you were here. We just brought in Ballast Point from San Diego. So the incubation happens in these accounts that I mentioned, which are kind of the Met Markets and the PCCs and the Chuck's 85th Street and the Pine Box and all those accounts that really help people discover brand. But what we're doing to try to get increasingly better is we call them specialty accounts, and we want to make sure when we have one of our salespeople walking into one of these accounts that are leading discovery with beer, that they have the education, they know the whole book. They're not just selling XYZ domestic beer because they've got a spiff on it this week. We want beer enthusiasts. So we define them as specialty accounts. Our rule is that we will only enter a specialty account with a specialty rep, and where we hope to be in 3 to 6 months is every specialty rep will be certified Cicerone second level.
Wow.
Yeah, so everyone in our selling organization will be server level, but everyone that enters one of these sort of beer, I call them the ninja Nazi accounts, will be able to talk the talk and be able to give the retailer the sort of information that they're dying for. Yeah.
So really investing in the craft business for you guys for long term.
Yeah, I mean, we are absolutely passionate about it. We don't look like it, but we're young guys. We drink craft beer.
Could have fooled me.
Well, it's been a long week. Yeah, we love it. It's fun. I mean, with all respect to our other brands, because we have wonderful domestic brands, wonderful imported brands, but I don't think there's any arguing that craft right now is saving the beer business, right? It's what makes beer interesting to 25-year-olds right now, and that's what beer needs. So
you mentioned having a big brand, Miller Coors. What's
don't
sort
get me
of
in trouble.
what's the makeup of your guys' business right now? How much of it is craft? How much is imports? How much is large domestic?
A lot of it's craft and import. Yeah, I think it's fair to say for anybody who's listening, it's as much high end as below high end.
For
our business.
Your percentage.
For our business.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Would craft have a majority of your guys' overall volumes?
We have some rural markets. We have a number of branches. We go from the Canadian border down to Medford to the California border. It's different as you move into rural areas versus metro areas. I mean, you know what the metro areas are like. I mean, high-end's driving the business. And it's actually, I believe, helping the domestic business come along, because if we're relevant to accounts, then our domestics are going to be in those accounts too. And hey, there's still a lot of people that drink domestic beer. Right. That is not going away. But it is very helpful to have a good craft and high-end portfolio, because you want accounts that want you to walk in.
So we were talking earlier, and maybe you'll punch me in the arm after this for bringing it up. But you said that on this notion of crafty beers, that Blue Moon is still rocking and rolling for you guys. It's a pretty large volume brand. Why do you think that is? Why is Blue Moon such a big volume driver, specifically in the Oregon and Washington markets?
Well, my opinion, right? So just my opinion is the source of volume for craft beer is beer itself, right? People aren't going to wake up and increasingly drink more beer in this country. Per capita consumption of overall beer is not going to turn upwards, right? We're dealing, since I've been in the business since '86, all I've heard was people are drinking less, but they're drinking better, and I completely believe that. So what is sourcing the growth for the craft brewers is beer itself. And we all know what sort of beer is going down and what sort of beer is going up. But I mean, I honestly believe the brands like Blue Moon are good because they're an easy hurdle for somebody to get into the category, right? I mean, a quadruple IPA from Coors Light is not an easy jump. Not that I want anybody to jump from Coors Light. But if people are going to trade up, they have to cross two thresholds. They have to absorb a higher price point, right? And they have to absorb a higher flavor profile. And things like Blue Moon are in that sweet spot. They're reasonably more challenging. They're reasonably more priced, and I think they help people get to the higher end of the business.
And what is Columbia doing to help trade those customers up from a Coors Light or another light beer to a Blue Moon to a specialty craft offering?
Yeah, well, I don't think we aggressively try to move people up, but we certainly know what to do. When you go into an account, every account's different, right? So I'd be a fool if I went to a Chevron station in Salem, Oregon, and tried to make them a whole door of 22, right? So, but when the account changes, when you get into a metro, you get into a retailer that really wants to lead discovery of beer, what we're doing is we're leading with the right things, right? We have a wonderful book. We have wonderful imports. We have wonderful craft brands. Even from our domestic breweries, we have wonderful alternatives. But I got to tell you, people still want to drink a lot of light beer too. So I think the key for the distributor is just trying to listen to the customer needs and sell them the right thing that's right for their customers, and not try to take them too far down the line, because you'll sort of break the train of trade up, right?
Sure.
I can't take somebody from 18 packs of light beer that they're doing great on and making a lot of money to 22-ounce, $10 quadruple IPAs. There's a progression that needs to happen.
So, stylistically, you said people, there are still a lot of consumers that want to drink lighter offerings. What can craft brewers do to better attack that segment of drinkers? Should they be focusing more on lighter, more sessionable offerings, in your opinion?
Well, there has to be a balance, in my opinion. You can't have your whole, well, I mean, if you're small, you can have your whole portfolio, but the industry as a whole can't be all lined up at 7 or 8% ABV and be successful in the long run. So I think it'll find its level. I mean, there's wonderful styles without looking at it as a compromise. I think there's wonderful styles, like I'm starting to see more Berliner Weiss, right? 3% ABV, it's a challenging beer, it's got sour components. That's a fun brand, and that's a way to get somebody. I just spent a couple days with the Ballast Point people. They make unbelievable beer, but they're all 7% alcohol, so there's got to be a balance, and I think everybody will find that balance.
Right.
Yeah.
So I want to switch gears a little bit here and talk about the breweries themselves and what they can do to support your guys' efforts a little bit.
Yep.
The biggest thing that we notice for craft breweries is a limited amount of resources, obviously a limited amount of capital,
yep.
Brewing some great beer, but might not have the sales and marketing components to help support all the great beer that they're making. So how important is it going to be going forward for craft brewers to, put feet on the street and support their brands? Will you guys work harder to support the brands that do that?
Well, if it's easier, it's easier. So if we work as a team, it's easier. So I can't argue that having more resources aimed in the right direction make it easier, and that lack of friction accelerates your brand through wholesale and helps you get to retail. But I think it doesn't need a big bundle of money. It just needs like a thoughtful, good discussion with this distributor about, I mean, what you're trying to do is move your brand 10 yards down the field. So you're not trying to win every account. I mean, told you there's 20,000 accounts in these 2 states. You don't need all, you couldn't make enough beer for all 20,000. You just want to move down the field. Hey, in football, if you move 3 yards at a time, you're going to score, right? So I think that's all you have to do is think about, well, what are
if you're going for it on 4th down every time, I guess.
Well, that's true. Yeah. I'm an Eagles fan, so I'm eternally hopeful. But I think you just have to be reasonable and sort of take the market one chunk at a time. And if you do that, you won't waste any money. I mean, some of the big brewers come in, they run incentives, they try to it's this sort of buckshot approach to things where, well, I've got a brand and I hope it sticks, so I'm going to give everybody a sales incentive to try to get it into 800 accounts, and I know that probably, 200 will stick, and that'll work. I mean, and from a big brewer scale, that actually makes economic sense. From a small brewer scale, I think you have to think about what is the next account I need to get, and we can deal with that. We can deal with that if you just slow down and think, and if you look at your business and you say, well, you know what, my brand really sells in this type of account, but I've never had a lot of success. And you got to try to draw mental pictures of what the account is that you need to get next. And if you can communicate that to the distributor, they can help you kind of chunk through the market and get it one piece at a time. And it really won't cost as much as you think. But if you don't take the time to think of your brand, if you don't look at where you're having success and where you're not, if you don't draw a picture of the account that you want next, you're going to waste a lot of money. Right?
I think so much of the brand building process for craft brewers is hindered by the fact that they don't have a lot of access to some of the data and trends and some of that information that Nielsen or IRI puts out.
Yep.
Is that something that they can access through you guys?
Absolutely.
Are you able to kind of provide them some information to help, like you said, plot that course of the accounts they need to be in?
Yeah, absolutely. We have access to market information. We have access to everything else we sell. We provide online access to your business, right? So if you do business with us, you could pull down your accounts on a daily basis. But yeah, absolutely. There's nothing we wouldn't provide to make you more successful and to make you more effective. Because if you're more effective, quite frankly, it's easier for us to deal, with getting you to where you want to be. But the hard things are when there's not that sort of thoughtfulness in terms of what we're doing together, and it just becomes this sell more. And that's frustrating because you've got to have a next step. I don't want to get too philosophical, but you eat an elephant one bite at a time, right? And there's a logical way to progress through the market. But we're staffed to do that. I mean, Max is here somewhere. Max is our guy in Oregon, and Max's job is to sit with our emerging brands and help them, coach them on what we know and what we believe the next step is. Yep.
So a lot of good discussion here, a lot of positive things being said. How about some concerns for you? What are you guys seeing, whether it's quality concerns or supply issues, rotation, all the rotation happening at on-premise? What are some of your concerns for the craft business, especially here in Oregon and Washington?
Yeah, well, it's pretty good. It's hard to draw a lot of concerns. I mean, you'd really have to reach to come up with concerns. I mean, we are in a dynamic where, hey, business is up double digits, but breweries are opening at a rate about 3 times of business, right? So the average brewery gets smaller by the day. And that's okay. You guys are small breweries, so it's working in your favor, right? The average item for the distributor gets smaller by the day. So, hey, we do great year over year, but what we grow in revenue is outpaced by what we grow in new items to get that revenue. So I deal with a lot of wholesale. I actually meet independently with a lot of wholesalers from around the country. And one of the items we talked about is it time to start managing SKU downs? And they're, nah, we don't think so. I mean, nobody really felt strongly, but there is a concern that SKUs aren't getting more efficient, they're getting less efficient, right? And they're all having shorter life cycles. So there's probably something that happens just because how much can the market digest, you know?
But that's that's what's keeping a lot of these craft brewers going, right? Is all that rotation and all the
shiny
specialty.
Stuff. Yeah.
It's the shiny new penny.
And we like the shiny thing because when you look at it, it actually makes you a lot. It makes brewery a lot of money. It makes us a lot of money as long as it's managed as a team and effectively, and it goes away. It kind of gets digested. Right.
So I heard a couple things there. SKU proliferation a little bit, and maybe proliferation of too many breweries trying to come online. How many new brands are coming across your desk?
Well, there's a lot, but not an overwhelming amount. I mean, we know the marketplace, and we know what retailers want, and we know what consumers want, so it's not overwhelming, not yet, but there's this general fear that one day it would be. Yeah. But, I mean, again,
I think that fear is everywhere. I mean, in every market we visit, there's always talk of, when will the bubble burst? In the Pacific Northwest, I mean, it's like it's Beervana, right, up here. And is it ever going to burst up here?
I don't know. You probably would have said it would have bursted 10 years ago.
I thought you told me before you had a crystal ball. So.
No, if I had a crystal ball, you'd be looking at me on satellite. I'd be in La Jolla right now on satellite, yeah. So, I mean, I don't think any of us can worry that right now. It'll happen. I went through it once. I'm not that old, but I went through this before. I mean, I went through mid-'90s. It was craft going crazy. In 1996, it went to 0, or 1997. Different times, there wasn't as much quality. I mean, you guys are much better brewers than you were 10 years ago. The consumers got all this social media, word of mouth. It's a whole different thing. I don't know that we have a parallel. So I would just say, careful with your investments, careful what you bite off. And the one thing I would tell everybody is try to get dense, close. Sell a lot of beer 50 miles from your brewery before you answer a call from somebody in Philadelphia because that's going to be tempting, but your business will be 50 miles from your brewery, and then if you're successful, it'll go on forever, and you might be in Philadelphia after that. But if you're not dense 50 miles from your brewery, My 2 cents, I think that's who feels the crash.
Interesting. So I did see a couple people raising hands right here. Did you have a
she's
question?
got something to say.
Yeah.
Where are you from?
And I'll repeat it for our live stream viewers as well.
Where are you from? Oh, we were with Dick and Matt Tuesday night, so go ahead. We have some perspective on that.
So you said in the marketplace, bottling, packaging, that's where you're going to push a lot of volume, right?
Yeah, supermarkets, C-stores, and bars, yeah.
You're trying to grow a brand, and our consumers are more educated and more informed about beer quality and what they want each year. People who are, growing up with parents who are craft drinkers right now will be more educated by the time they hit 21.
Right.
In packaging, it is a different world when it comes to quality and consistency. What challenges do you see that small breweries face now into making that leap into the packaging world?
Right. So the question, just so everyone hears it, is the challenges of a small brewery to make the leap into packaging, and I think this is something that Joel might be able to speak to as well on our next panel. But making the leap into packaging from being a draft-only brewery.
And also, what are customer expectations? What's a realistic level as far as consistency and quality of product?
And the customer expectations that follow. So,
what keeps me up at night is lack of pasteurization and warm shelves. And that's kind of my opinion, the dirty little secret of this business is beer on a warm shelf that's not pasteurized, right? So we've all seen, so anybody who's a brewer knows the staling of beer, model, time, temperature, and just hops go away, and you might as well have not used them. So that scares me.
And also colloidal stability of the beer and
Yeah.
visual effects.
Yeah.
So it can be such a turnoff for customers.
Yeah, we call that the Christmas globe effect, yeah. I'd say that, again, you're looking at a world where you're growing breweries 35% and you're growing business roughly 14%. So even I said the average brewery is getting smaller, but the average case on the floor is getting older. But I think it's pretty good. I mean, most retailers are refrigerating it. Most wholesalers are getting the beer through the system very quickly. I wonder about the outlying areas sometime, and when breweries ship beer and they don't really go out and kind of track its code. I was just with a brewery from Northern California. Every one of their guys has an iPad, and they write down the codes, and they sort of quantify the average age of their beer, and that's remarkable. Now, everybody's not going to have that capability, but that's scary. So average age of, especially warm beer, is scary.
And what can small brewers do to work with you to ensure that their product is moving through in a timely manner?
Yeah, so
produce the correct amount.
Yeah.
So just so everyone hears, how can small brewers work with you guys to make sure that quality product is still on the shelves and there's not old beer out in the marketplace?
Sell us less and sell us more frequently. Yeah, and but it's hard because when you're a production brewery, you sort of are producing beer in batches, and it doesn't lend itself to trickling, so ideally everybody would have 7 days of beer, right? The distributor would have 7 days, the retailer would have a week's worth of beer, and everybody's fine, but the brewers in this room know that you just don't brew that way, right? You've got to brew in batches, so it's not easy, but I would say if you have a seasonal like Super Fuzz, which I think is the coolest thing in the world, even though we don't sell it in Washington, we sell it in Oregon, but we love it. But something like Super Fuzz, you're going to be caught between, wow, everybody wants this, we want to brew more, and hey, we want that seasonal to go away, and we want the other one to come on quick. So kind of that's the balance.
And is there a way to scale your brewery as you grow to meet those needs more appropriately? Because there is a seasonality to our business. Winter is slow, everybody knows it. Summer is hard.
So scaling again, back to the scale issue.
That's a Dick question.
Yeah.
I think he's down in Oregon still. Yeah. Yeah.
How do you scale to accommodate the growth?
That's a brewer's question. I mean, you want 200 barrel tanks. I'm not a brewer.
You worked for one back
I
in Boston.
did, but I was a sales guy. I'm a sales guy.
Say you've got
I'm a sales guy.
say you've got a Super Fuzz or
Yeah.
Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, and
Yeah.
takes off big.
Yeah.
One of your brands goes big. Which
Yeah.
is what I see in a lot of breweries.
Well, if it's big, it'll turn over really quick, and maybe that's not the problem. Yeah.
Awesome.
So just care. As long as you care, you'll win, right? Caring to me, you know, the brewery I worked for a long time, we cared. So, like, if my kids hate me, right? So I go in a Safeway, and if I walked past something that I knew was close to code, oh, Dad, really? Okay, now you got to go. You got to get, and you take an extra 40 minutes in the store because now you found some in the back and everything. Now you got to call the distributor. But if you care, you care. If you don't, what I tell you, the other thing that scares me is small breweries that make world-class beer that say, oh, our beer defies codes. They code it, right? Their brewer codes it, but they say, oh, this will last forever. You're either in or you're out on code. And you have to be willing to pull it out of the market, pay a penalty, share it with your distributor because both parties probably had something to do with it, but you either care or you don't. And I got to tell you, of all the breweries I deal with, it's probably 50-50. People that care and people that don't. And meaning they don't, they'll see out of code beer in the store, you're with them, and they just keep walking.
Awesome. So, Mike, unfortunately, that's all the time we got for this Q&A. You're going to be off the hot seat now. If you guys have more questions for Mike, he'll be around.
Yeah.
Get this guy a beer. His glass is empty, and feel free to holler at him. If you guys need another beer, round of applause. If you guys need another beer, we actually got to do some microphone changing right now, so feel free to grab one, and we'll kind of reconvene in the next 5 or 10 minutes, and we'll have our second panel for you guys. Thanks.